Cloud. Hi, Allison. Good to see you. Welcome, folks, to Behold the Portfolio Careerist. This is a book talk with Brie Abramowicz and myself. Hi, Lori. Um, Bree's the author of the new book Polyworker, which is all about portfolio careers. My name is MJ Halberstadt. I worked with Bree as coach and briefly as editor on the book, but mostly I'm coming to you in the capacity of reader and fan of this book. Here's what's in store for today. First, we're going to start by talking about the book itself. Then we're going to talk a little bit about the process of writing the book. Then we're going to pull out some lessons that Brie and I learned about portfolio careers and writing books. And then we'll open the floor to questions about literally any of those things. Um, I want to get us started with one of my favorite sections of the book. Bree, would you mind reading from the beginning of chapter 7? I think that'll give folks a good intro if they haven't read the book.
Okay, and then to set some context, it's called the chapter 7 is called "It's Lonely in This Toilet Stall," which is there's a lot of pop culture references in the book. So this one is to a really popular movie that if you're a millennial, you might be familiar with. Okay, I'll start reading. August 2024. I'm standing in a Zoom queue, not like metaphorically, literally standing in my kitchen in a bright orange blouse that seemed like a good idea until I looked in the mirror. But now it's too late to change, and I look like a human creamsicle waiting to be let into a virtual workshop to talk about building a portfolio career. What the hell do I know about building a portfolio career? Why are people looking at me like I have a clue what I am talking about when I just started to do this 2 months ago? Anyway, I do the talk. Somehow, I don't intellectually brown out. People nod. I even get one of those tiny celebratory reactions from someone on the call who is self identified as a quote unquote fangirl. What? I have fan people now? Afterwards, I'm bracing for the classic, thanks so much, and everyone dropping off the call as a standard for these sorts of things. But the CEO that hired me to do the webinar stays on the call to chat. I immediately assume I've said something wildly inappropriate and I'm about to get gently reprimanded. Instead, she thanks me for my presentation, beaming with enthusiasm. I nod, awkwardly, contorting my mouth into a forced smile. She wants to introduce me to some woman in Australia who has a similar story. Cue shock. Fast forward a few days, I'm on Zoom with the woman I've been introduced to who is absurdly kind, like really kind. Not the corporate girl boss, tight smile, let me know how I can support you, I won't kind. She actually listens. She asks weirdly insightful questions that make me feel both seen and slightly vulnerable, in a good way, maybe. And then get this, she offers me resources, sends a Google Doc link in the chat, introduces me to two people via WhatsApp while we're still talking. Suddenly, I'm agreeing to a virtual coffee next week to discuss my coaching framework, which, full disclosure, is held together by duct tape and hope. I hang up feeling lighter, hopeful even, very suspicious. This doesn't happen in my world. In 20 years of professional networking, this sort of exchange has always been transactional. So naturally, I'm spiraling. What's the catch? Where's the upsell? Is this an MLM? Am I about to be invited to Bali to cry in circles and sell essential oils?
Thank you, Bree. Um, yeah, I figured that's a good entry point because I feel like that's a point where the book goes from being about pain points and the challenges of systems to looking forward more hopefully, which I think is so essential about the book. Let's keep orienting our audience to the book. Can you tell us a little bit about the title of the book and where it comes from and how is polywork distinct from a portfolio career? What do you see as the difference between those?
I love that you asked that question, especially since in the chat some folks are less familiar with the term. So the title was a challenge. Admittedly, I really wanted to make sure I was giving people a cue of like what the book experience would be. And so, polyworking, I have a little graph or table in the book, but I describe in the book this creative autonomy curve going from like gig work where you trade time for money, and the motivation there is typically cash and or flexibility. And I titled the book Polyworker because to me it's this interim state between gig work, which is time for money, and then this nirvana state, which is the aspiration that draws a lot of people, myself included, for the point in time that I wrote this book, of polyworking. And polywork is managing multiple roles and projects at once. Some of these may not actually be tied to income, they may be tied to passion projects or your priorities. So it's more of like moving towards income optionality with a cobbled together stream of projects and better work life integration. And so the operating system is a little different than gig work. It's not full capitalism, it's your values in capitalism. And then portfolio career, why I didn't call the book Portfolio Career is that, again, it's a nirvana state, it's an aspiration. We are all operating within capitalism, we have bills to pay. And also, when we move to this type of model where we want to center our values and our priorities, it takes a while to slough off that
Mm.
operating system that does not come from us. So to me, it was really important to show that sliding scale of building a career around your values and also show that it's not fixed. Like you can have moments throughout the day where you're operating as your highest self, and then other weeks, months, periods where, it's still in that interim polyworking state. You're managing multiple things, but you have a mindset slip or tight cash is tight. And to me, it was really important as more people were aspiring to build portfolio careers to have that discussion, which is why I wrote and titled the book as I have.
Mm. There have now been multiple people in the chat self-identifying as polyworker while you were talking.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
when during the journey of building a portfolio career do you hope that folks will read this book? Like what does it cover for readers?
Um, I will answer that question in two parts. I think
Mm.
that for me, I originally thought it would be for people that are considering their portfolio career curious. Maybe they've heard the term, they've made the shift to independent work, or they haven't. I thought, again, that the audience for this would be a lot of disillusioned tech workers, possibly millennials. In the process of doing beta reading, which we will get into later in the discussion, I have found that there is, I am told, something for everyone. So whether you are, again, portfolio career skeptical, whether you're curious, whether you're a year or two into your independent journey, whether you are a tech worker or not, there is something to affirm your experience, whether it's in process or retrospectively. And that is my intent with this book. It can be at any point in your journey. Because this is so new, I think it's important to document and have a body of work, in this case, this book, to have those discussions about the inner work of trying to work this way.
Totally. Um, and based on the descriptions of the themes, this
Mm-hmm.
could sound like a very dry book, but I hope
Mm-hmm.
folks can appreciate that there's also a lot that's very personal here. There's a lot of pop culture reference. It's actually a very buoyant book to read. Can you talk a little bit about the structure of the book, the balance of personal anecdote, social commentary? Why did you include those things? Why did that feel important?
In part, it's how my brain works. So uh, I identify with the term sense maker. So I'm constantly looking at art or news and making connections across of those things. I think art is a mirror. And so pop culture is a really important vehicle to look at for kind of a signal where society is going. And some of the things that we're collectively wrestling with. So it was important to fold that into the book. But then also, I don't know about you, but I've had experiences where with books that have been so dry and they've made such great points, but they're dense, and they've not captivated me. And so I wanted this book to be accessible to read, to feel also easy to read given some of the heavier topics and themes that are within. Like, I think the world feels very heavy, and I wanted a book that would, again, be a mirror to make someone feel like they're sitting with a friend as they're moving through the pages and through my 1 year of going through this process of my first year of building a portfolio career, and feel less alone, but also to laugh in the process, because I don't think it's all sad. I think there is joy to be had in the messiness of starting over.
That's really well put. I like you describing yourself as a sense maker that slaps. And I'm reading a book right now that is so dry. I compared it to the Saltine challenge. I forget how many you're supposed to eat in a row, but I just like couldn't do it.
Yeah.
Um, I want to pull up the portfolio career canvas.
Mm-hmm.
This comes about halfway through the book, and I think it really helps anchor the reader's experience. It's, I think, one of the most useful frameworks that you introduce in the book.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell me about the origin of the canvas itself and how it's helped you and your coaching clients?
Yeah. I think there's different styles of portfolio career coaching. I have a model of building more of a portfolio life than trying to help my clients turn themselves into like a six income stream media company, which is, again, at the time that I was building mine, felt more like what the zeitgeist was talking about. And to me, I feel like the movement, I wanted to add this framework because I felt like the movement had kind of lost the plot a little bit. People are gravitating to this because they don't want to just center money. And so this framework, built on an idea that Charles Handy, who I reference in the book, had come up with around this idea of a portfolio life where you center your invisible labor as well as your paid work, and also things that need a little bit more time, like experiments or upskilling, your acts of service, so that you're not putting the dollars as the sole focal point or the hub in the wheel. And so this was a way of helping kind of, again, confront looking at things purely from a monetary standpoint, which, again, we all have to pay our bills and make a living. But that is one component of a good, happy, fulfilling life. So I've identified, just for those that won't be able to see this, that might be hearing it, there's wage work, acts of service, experiments, caregiving, upskilling, and self-care. And I adapted Charles Handy's approach because it was written in the 80s, I believe, which, again, was very ahead of its time. We're now just starting to talk like that about our relationships with work and better work-life integration. But I think I adapted it for, as a woman, like, again, centering some of those invisible projects that we take on as women, and like centering that just a little bit more. And then the other one was experiments. I think so much of getting going in the beginning is figuring out what you like, not what you think you should like, and protecting space for that and allowing it, again, to be a blank canvas versus jumping immediately to, I have to immediately replace all of my income within 2 months. And I'm not even going to take stock of, does this give me energy? Am I lighting up while doing it? Am I feeling like I'm making the impact that I want?
Yeah, I like the way that you're describing it as sort of a tool for finding a sense of balance.
Mm-hmm.
The more time that I've spent with this, the more I think about it almost like the different organs and appendages that an organism needs to have, like
Mm-hmm.
looking for sustenance and smelling danger and like exploring new areas. Um, yeah, this has been super helpful for me just as a reader. Um, I'm going to transition us to talking about the process. I'll quickly answer John's question about the saltine challenge. That is the thing that teenagers in my hometown dared one another to do, to eat like 8 saltine crackers in a row, and it just completely parches your mouth. It's a bad joke about dryness. All
Mhm.
right. I'm going to carry us forward and read one of my own favorite sections of the book. This is coming from page 119, so a bit later in the book. Your inner critic is an unchosen colleague in these moments of self-transformation, lurking in the corners of that liminal space between who you are right now and who you're trying to become. Designing your own CRM is a fucking breeze compared to the torture of that voice in your head whispering fraud when your first Zapier automation fails. Sure, you can learn Canva in an afternoon, but try recovering from discovering those typos after you've printed 200 copies of your workbook. And posting on LinkedIn? Easy. Coming to terms with 0 likes and still believing you deserve to take up space online? That's the actual work. This is why we idealize business gurus. They've achieved that nirvana state we're all chasing, and they seem so damn confident. And yet, the only way through it is through it, you know? There is no shortcut. You can't consume your way into being who you want to be. You can't get coached into certainty. You just have to move, inch by painful inch. Ship things before you feel ready. Say things out loud before the words are perfect. Confidence isn't a prerequisite of this process, it's a consequence. Which I think is a pretty good description of a creative process of any type. And Bree, you are someone who you came to writing a book already having established a pretty solid writing process. You had a podcast, you were writing your newsletter, you're a prolific reader and consumer of culture. How did that set you up for writing a book? And when did you know that you had a book in you and that it was time to pull the trigger?
Yeah, and I'm gonna fold in Ashley's question into my
Hmm.
answer for that. So Ashley said, "How can someone do this without working part time and then work towards work life balance?" I have, again, this is my specific composition of a portfolio career. I've always wanted to write a book. I used to write a lot as a kid, and I just lost that habit or ritual of writing and a creative outlet. I didn't know when I sat down to work this way that I was going to write one or when the right time was. It eventually revealed itself to me. So, Ashley, I'll fold in my answer to your question about like, how do you do this? It, I think a portfolio career forces you to be honest about your resourcing and then take on as much as you can. And you will have potentially, as you get used to working this way, as I have described in the book, crash outs where your eyes are bigger than your stomach and you have to adjust. So for me, I really wanted to fold in like my focus on writing this book. So my starting point, knowing that that was a future goal I had, I didn't want to go and sit down and write a book immediately. When I decided that I wanted to build a portfolio career, I started with coaching, and then I posted on LinkedIn 2 to 3 times a week. That was a lot at the time. And then I built the stamina where that became 15 minutes a post. That took me a couple of months. Maybe for other people, it would be a lot faster, but I overthought everything and every sentence, as is described in the passage that MJ read. Then, after a year of building towards longer form writing, I then wrote an even longer form, beyond a newsletter essay series of multiple pages. And then it clicked for me after I wrote the three essays. I remember texting MJ, who I had met a couple of months prior, and I was like, I think I'm ready to write the book. And then I had to make some decisions because I actually have a full time job. To be clear, I'm not working part time. I wrote the book, manage coaching business, and um, also have a full-time job. So for me, I have to plan with the time that I have. So I work a 40-hour a week job. They get 40 hours a week of my time. They don't get more. And that, again, I don't know. I strategically picked a job that allowed me to work that many hours and said no to applying to jobs, and also pulled myself out of interviews where I sensed that I would have to work 50 to 60 because it wouldn't allow for the other aspects of my portfolio. So that was step one. And then step two was figuring out, okay, now that I layered in a full-time job and I had a year of coaching under my belt, what does the right amount of hours look like? And so for me, that's no more than 10 to 15 hours to work on a couple of coaching clients a month, and then writing this book. And then when I started writing the book, I actually cut down my coaching client volume to accommodate my writing hours per month. So I think the point of that is that, like, there's a build process of understanding generally where you want to go, and then picking jobs that align with the resourcing that you have, and then confronting your perfectionism. Like, I could perfect my posting. I could have done the book entirely on my own, but I partnered with MJ to make that process a little less clunky because I only had 10 to 15 hours a week to work on that part of my business. So the time constraint, you have to kind of get used to it at first, but I think it's actually healthier so that you don't create the same burnout process that you have with a full-time job of just, and again, if you have kids, for example, maybe that's 2 to 5 hours a week. There's no one over your shoulder telling you that it needs to be more. That answer comes from you and what feels most aligned to your priorities and your capacity.
Can can we remind each other what was the timeline of working on the book? When did we start voice memoing about it? Was it like June of last year?
Um, well, I was on a train in, when would that have been? It was before I lost my job, and I remember texting a friend and saying I'm going to write a book. And then I didn't do anything about that for 2 years. And then you and I met in a group called Coaching Corner. And I really liked the questions that you asked. And I thought, well, if I'm going to write a book and I know this person's the writing coach, this is the style of writing coach I want to work with. But I wrote a newsletter and social posts for another 6 or 7 months after that exchange. So I had a whole year and a half under my belt of writing.
Mm.
And then I had the muscle. And then I wrote that essay series, and I was like, and now I know what I want to write about, which was like part two. And then I texted you, and then we started 3 weeks later, which was June. I think I reached out to you in May of last year. We started writing
Mm.
in June. And then we took a month and a half to dial in, what is this book about? Who is it for? What is the voice and tone? We wrote a practice chapter that I
Mhm.
completely threw out because it was for me, not for my audience. And I had to expunge that first in order to get to
Mhm.
the book. And then we did the outline of the book, and then the rest just flew out of me. And we wrapped up the first version of the book, I think it was by end of September. So, and all of that time frame from June to end of September, I did things in my creative flow cycle, which I learned in the process of writing this book is I do things in 2 week spurts. So I have to write a lot in my writing time, as you call it, which tends to be on a Sunday. And I would, again, once I had the structure in place, which took us a couple of sessions, then I was able to write like 15 pages at a time. And then I would disappear. I would not touch the book. I would go on walks and think about the book or talk to friends about the book, but I wouldn't have my computer open to continue picking back up because that is not how my creative process worked. And so then I would have conversations and continue to coach people, and then I would come back to it. That may not work for everyone, but that was my creative process. And I think that having that structure up front at first, which I was a little bit admittedly resisting as a creative person, really helped me build the structure I needed to then go and do the things in my creative way in without a time constraint necessarily. And then before I knew it, we had wrapped up the book. And then we sent it out to beta readers, got feedback, and then we developmentally edited it and it was done. And I was so shocked. I expected it to take like a full year of just getting it to a spot where I was ready to share it. But I think that structure up front and then honoring how I work enabled me to creatively write in the way that I ultimately wanted to, which is I think the the problem with a lot of 9 to 5 work is like you have to kind of work within the bounds of how the organization and the people there do things creatively. And it was such a great like experience of structuring it in the way that worked for me.
Yeah, it's helpful to hear you describe your self-awareness of your own creative habits and how to capture that energy and how to do it in a way that doesn't take energy away from the other priorities that you've chosen for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Is there anything that, like, imagine that you could send this book to Brie 1 year ago today. Is there anything in the book that you feel that might surprise the past version of Brie or that represents like a really big changing of your mind over the course of the process of writing the book?
Mm, well, two things. I would have just started working in this way. So I think I would be surprised reading the words on the pages with how honest I was. I think part of working this way has helped me take off what had been a 20-year corporate mask, filtering everything through how I should show up to actually, breaking down that fourth wall and being honest about my struggles with anxieties when doing things that are new and creative, and recognizing that that vulnerability is not a weakness but actually really helpful, not only for myself, obvious benefit there, but for other people. So I think that would be the big one. And then the second one, again, I would have just started writing. So I don't know that I would have believed that I would write a book a year and a half
Mm,
later just because I told people that I wanted to.
mm, I didn't realize that. That's cool. So I'd love to get a little meta and carry some lessons that we learned from the
Mm-hmm.
book. Now that you've done it, what is your advice to the next portfolio careerist who decides that they want to write a book?
Um, I think try to have something that you put out there, possibly before the book, to learn what it's like to manage multiple things at once. I, I Carissa's on this call, so she would have been aware of this process, but and I outlined this in the book. At one point, I layered in a full-time job after building my own business for 10 months. And I didn't know my husband and I were going to move to Seattle. Terrible timing, on
I
top of,
forgot about that
yeah,
part.
awful, all the things all at once. And then on top of that, I had decided that I was going to launch a course. So I mean, you hear all of that and you're like, well, no crap, you're going to crash out. You're just producing the same burnout pattern that of taking on too much. And so in January, I crashed and burned and had to like kind of reset and be like, whoa. And perhaps it sounds masochistic, but I think it's important to go through that because I think,
Hmm,
a lot of times, at least for me, maybe not for other people, but when I think about corporate, I think prior to building my portfolio career, I felt like corporate was responsible for holding my boundaries and protecting my health. And now I realize in this process of like, only I know my capacity and my seasonality for the priorities I have, and I am responsible for holding them. and you have 20 plus, I do 20 plus years left of a career. Why do I have to do everything all at once? Is that worth
Mm,
damaging the vessel that is my body and my creativity? No. Hard no. So I
mm,
think if you've always wanted to write a book, that it might be beneficial to try a baby project beforehand to see what that's
mm,
like. Especially, again, admittedly, I think I'm able to navigate having a business plus this book plus full time because I don't have kids. So I'm not. I sometimes overemphasize that, but I just want to acknowledge that that's like a very real thing. Um, but I think it's important to like practice that a little bit before taking on something that's going to be your creative baby. Nobody is going to care about your book as much as you do, and you are going to get wrapped up in
mm,
like all of these creative details. And the actual book writing is probably going to be the easiest part. It's all of the creative decisions, things like title, the cover design, how you want to promote your book, etc. That there's just a million discrete decisions. And if you're juggling something else with it that isn't anchored in a way, like if you don't have, for example, a full-time job that's pretty steady or a freelance pipeline that doesn't go empty for a while, it can get overwhelming really quick. And so I think
mm,
that would be my advice, of just like try something and then get in the habit of writing, so that you don't put too much pressure on yourself to get it done when the book is going to be done when it wants to be done.
mm. Well, that's reminding me of one of the many things that I learned about your career from reading the book so many times. Um, when you were applying for jobs and wound up in the job that you're currently at, you were
Mm-hmm.
in a stage where you had already launched your coaching practice
Mm-hmm.
and you were sort of out on LinkedIn as a coach and applying for full-time jobs, and you experienced what I might describe as a like a mismatch or like an assumed mismatch that no employer would want to hire someone who has a visible gig, but then you notice that they like kind of didn't care,
Mm-hmm.
and they sort of acknowledge like, okay, as long as you can hold the boundaries that are necessary to meet the requirements of this job, we don't really care what you do on your nights and weekends. And you had a like groundedness and an ability to go into that working relationship in a healthier way than it sounds like other previous jobs where you assumed that they owned all of your time.
Yeah.
I
And
I wonder. Mm,
yeah, I think it would be important to like build on that a little bit, that um, I I did not start looking for a full-time job because I didn't know what I wanted to do. And about 6 months into coaching, when I found out about the portfolio career thing, I had a lot of guilt about wanting to add something in. But I was like, realistically, my sweet spot is somewhere, when I'm not writing a book, by the way, closer to 10 clients. I don't want to have more than that because then I can't give the level of attention that I like to give for my practice to fully replace my income. So it was like, plus it's just, again, putting so much pressure on it to sustain you financially. And so then that unlock for me was like, oh, it's okay that I have, closer to 5, or maybe it's 10 in some months, but not consistently. And it doesn't feel like feast or famine. I can add in that full-time job. But at the time that I was deciding to do that, I was like, oh, I don't know if employers are going to be okay with this. And I was like, well, Brie, you better just say it up front because you don't want to waste your time prepping in these 7 round interviews. And I had like a window. I had a 4 month financial window where it was like, I am worth the risk of stating this up front and having an employer tell me, no, we're not okay with it. And I keep it moving. And then once I blow past that window, I'm going to trust this process that it'll work out, that being this upfront will provide me the set of opportunities that will allow me to still have my coaching business and work full time. And
Mhm.
I just started reaching out to employers on LinkedIn. So there was no there was no hiding the fact that I had a business. And
Mm.
that's how I again forwarded that conversation into my final interviews and built that into my contract. And it was a little bold, but I think that ultimately I got the composition that I want. And I try to reevaluate it. I posted about this last week actually, of like every 3 months, I have a coming to terms with myself of like, is this structure still working? At some point, maybe the full time job becomes too much, or maybe I have the resilience that I didn't have at that time to start building in fractional. Like, I don't know. Right now, it works. But I always own my career, every single piece of it. And once I know something has changed, I will make an active effort to go and create that opportunity, because change takes time. And so once I have my mind set up, if I, again, just over communicate that, you can find the employment partners, maybe it's a smaller pool of them, that are okay with that sort of working model. And I think more and more employers are going to have to be. Um, it's just, again, at the time that the period of time the book was written, it was a little bit more taboo. People kind of hid
Mm.
their quote unquote side hustles and that sort of thing. But I just made a choice not to do that.
Mm. There's a lot of affirmation in the chat. Miranda says places seem to prefer to hire people who are already employed. Go figure. Um, Ashley adds, but they do like to own all of people's time.
Yep.
And then Carissa says it seems like it's becoming more common accepted for people to be more open with their projects outside of their full-time jobs, but it's a dance to find the right employer for the situation.
And I will, all of that plus one to every single comment. I'm not saying that once I got there that it was unicorns and rainbows. Like, we just had a big leadership change, and now like I have a day job. It's 9:40. If they owned all of my time, I wouldn't be comfortable being on this call. But I'm an adult and I've structured my day to accommodate this call. And it's not a problem. But there have been times when I've had this happened with me and MJ, like a prep call for planning for this, and then a call moved. I had a block and somebody went over the block, and I got salty about it. And I was like, deep breaths. If this happens 5 more times, then I'm going to have to do something about it. Right. Like, it's not perfect. But again, I didn't want to set myself up to immediately be pushed out because I hadn't disclosed these things. So I think that is step one. And then the rest is, again, keeping a bill of receipts of that time theft, as I describe it in the book, and making sure it's
Hmm.
still working for you.
Yeah. I'm gonna move us forward towards Q&A in just a minute, but Brie, is there anything else that you want to make sure that we touch on or share with folks?
No, I'm curious what questions people have.
Cool. As we start moving towards Q&A, I want to invite folks to engage with Bree and I further. You can buy the book at buildwithbree.com, or you can write with me, visit findthewordswithmj.com. If you live in Seattle and you're going to be around the weekend after next, I'm coming through Seattle. I'm hosting two little ride-along programs. Would love to see you there. Would love to know what questions folks have. Feel free to raise hands or just come off mic. Um, what's on your minds, folks?
Hi,
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 Lori.
Lori.
I have a cold, so sorry my voice is like, "Wah." Um, but I thank you so much for hosting this. This is an incredible conversation for folks that are unemployed, facing age discrimination. I think you're in this sweet spot in the market, and I just want to like shout from the rooftops about this book, and I haven't even read it
Mm,
yet. Um,
Thank you.
and I wonder if for two questions. One, if is there any place to buy the book locally in Portland?
I'm working on that. I had a decision to make budget wise. And so right now it's just Amazon and they have exclusive distro, but I am working on Ingram Spark. because you are not the first person that has asked me, and I do want to provide an option. So once I get that set up on Ingram Spark, if you want to connect with me or anybody else, just send me your email, because that should be a way for you to buy directly, not from Powell's online, but like from the bookstore. You should be able to request it once I have that set up.
Cool.
And I appreciate you asking.
Yeah, and there's also the literary arts new
I went through
book.
them for a class, actually. I love them.
I do too. I do too. Okay, thank you.
Question though, clarification on literary arts. Were you thinking just like flagging the book being available or some sort of speaking? Tell
A
me more about your
speaking
idea.
a speaking engagement, in the
Mhm.
cafe,
Mhm.
would be awesome.
Okay,
And
great.
selling the book in the cafe. Yeah.
Awesome. I love the piece of art behind you, by the way.
Thank you, local Oregon artist. Thank you.
Mm. Feel better, Lori.
Anyone else? Ashley, I'm curious to hear your thoughts. You said you were going to chew on my response to your question. What is coming up for you in my answer, if anything new? Oh, it'll take days. Okay. Gotcha.
Ashley asked earlier, is this for the person who can make enough money part-time and deciding to not work full-time for WLB? I, Ashley, can you share a little more context? I think I missed when that question was asked.
When you were ready to read the chapter, and then I tried to fold some of my response to that into my answer to your question.
Got it. Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
I was over here typing rapidly so that I wouldn't throw another little face in here, but might as well unmute. I fully identify as a polyworker and had never had that terminology, so thank you. Um, I'm curious about like the mental side of things, if you have any, experience with that, just because there's so much freedom and so much joy in polyworking. This
Mm-hmm.
is a new thing for me and I'm loving it.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also days where, everything is on you. There's very little external validation sometimes. There's a lot of uncertainty. What experience do you have in kind of riding that wave of like
Yeah.
pursuing this and not always having like the same stability that a like typical, 9 to 5 corporate job would give you?
I love that question. And that question is what prompted me to be so honest about my experience in the book. Um, I was a mess and I still have days, although I would say I feel much more calibrated towards like homeostasis now, where I just embrace the chaos. And I discussed in the book this idea of a professional polycule. For me, the turning point was not like I fully replaced income with some of my income streams that were on the quote unquote side. We need to, I hate that term, but you know what I mean. Or, decentering money. Like it sounds great in spirit, but when it's just you sitting with your laptop, and I have two cats too, it can get, you can get in your head, especially if you are a creative person. You can think through all of that creativity can be fueled into the like what ifing scenarios, and again thinking through certain things like potentially too deeply, and not having that cutoff. For me, building community was the biggest turning point. And I talk about it towards the latter half of the book of the that chapter I read, the It's Lonely in This Toilet Stall. I got invited because of a TikTok, I deactivated TikTok for reasons with the change, but I played around on that app, and I had one TikTok where I talked about building a portfolio career. Again, I was 2 months into working that way. And then I got a speaking gig because of it. And I was just floored because I had millennial ums throughout the whole video. I had no idea what the hell I was doing, and was like, is this even valuable? And then I got asked to speak at this event. And then that was the starting point to getting connected to multiple communities. And then also on LinkedIn, I have all sorts of people from all over the globe that are working this way that I'm connected with, that I meet either in person or that we cheer each other along. And I think that connection, that rootedness in community with other like-minded professionals is like one of the most, if not the most important things to build in to make yourself not feel crazy. And the book is like my attempt at giving you a taste of like, it's not you. It's okay. This is all part of this process, the disillusionment and feeling like it's crazy making at times throughout, so that you maybe come into that a realization of like, oh, I need to find 5 other freelancers or other fractional people that might be in an exact same boat as me to cheer each other on and then provide that support system. Because I just don't think, I don't think it's possible. Yes, you can have therapy, but like your therapist is not going to understand what you're talking about or how you're trying to work. And so for me, it's like the mental health investment of the therapy, the working out to decompress, eating right, trying to sleep when I can. I have perimenopause and sometimes I struggle sleeping, but when I can, I do. And then the last component, which is the biggest one, is just finding friends. And it's really fun to have professional friends, like actual professional friends where you're not just talking to network transactionally, but actually being like, hey, you know, my kid's sick for 4 days and that just completely threw this week to shit. And I just need someone to commiserate and tell me like that's part of this process and I'm not failing, like sometimes that's what you need.
Thank you. I appreciate that very much. I'm lucky I've found MJ to kind of cling on to. And I hope you'll actually chuckle a bit about this, but I unintentionally convinced my therapist to leave her, corporate office she was working for, and now she's self-employed because she watched me do it. So
There you go. See?
um, she's definitely turned into a weird reciprocal, relationship where she's like, "Hey, your freelance lifestyle looks nice, so I'm gonna try it too."
I love the compounding influence of these ideas. Because
Yeah.
Brie, you might be aware that I reached out to a bunch of ghostwriters because I
Mhm.
wanted folks to connect with, and Allison is one of the ghostwriters that I connected with. And now
Mhm.
we have quarterly haunting meetings where we
Oh
just
my
can
God, that's
like
amazing. Yeah.
group and talk about what's going on in ghostwriter worlds. And now, Allison, now you see why I was so motivated to put that together.
Yeah.
And Bree, there was a big celebration in our group chat when your book came out. So know that
Aw,
there's a
thank
ripple effect of
you.
fans.
Thank you. I think I follow you on LinkedIn actually and love your content, by the way. Yeah, great.
Thanks, Allison. I wanna lift up Ashley's question one more time, and thanks for letting us know that you're not able to come on mic right now. Um, Ashley asks, is this more of a process or an end state? Brie, I'm curious what you think. The word practice comes to mind.
Yeah.
In the workbook at the end of the book,
Mhm.
there's you crafted an activity called Twiddle the Knobs of Your Give a Fuck Budget, and it's not about like hitting a switch and now you're a portfolio careerist and now it's perfect and you've locked it into place. It really is, as I understand it, about incrementally creating new habits, setting the boundary over here and then pushing it a little further. How would you see it?
It's definitely a practice, and that's why that framework I mentioned of the creative autonomy spectrum. Um, I've again had periods where I've quote unquote backslid. Like it's not you arrive at the state and you're there forever. And it's a huge change to operate this way. And there's not a lot of infrastructure to support us. So that's where, again, the community element is so important. But also having some grace, giving yourself some grace and making the change that you can slowly, bit by bit, to make that mindset change and to change the income too, to support the life that you want, not the other, have work become the center of everything. So yeah, to me, like as we structured the book, it is a nonfiction. It is based on my story, but I don't give it a neat and tidy ending. It feels open-ended. As you're reading my story, my hope and intent is for you to feel your story, like maybe your flavor of it as you go through that first year, to be okay with living in the liminal space of it being a practice and not an arrived end state. So I like that word.
Cool. Thank you. Are there any other questions from folks before we part ways for today?
I had one question actually, and thank you for the talk. This is really wonderful. I'm looking forward to reading the book. You had in one of the in that the 6 quadrants that you showed, one of them was upskilling, and I think somebody had a good question or good point about how upskilling can be really exhausting. I would imagine there's a lot of upskilling as you're like even going after create or like that figuring out what creative pursuit is right. Like how have you figured out, like, I imagine it's a process, but how have you figured out the right types of upskilling? And would love if you could talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I really appreciate that question. And again, this book was helped force me to unpack like some of the things that I was just naturally doing as I was building it. So for the upskilling, there's just so much information, I think, coming at us of like the tools that we need to learn. For me, I can't just force myself to learn things without a practical application. So for me, portion of my portfolio career, like the podcast, for example, when I did it, I was like, well, I want to work on my public speaking skills. I want to learn how to create a show. I want to learn video production, a little bit about audio engineering, and then promoting a product that is different than a B2B or B2C SaaS company. I think it involves a different type of marketing mix. So for me, the podcast was a practical application to gobble up all of those skills. And so when I made that project's focal point, it took the pressure off of like, I need to go and find 12 paid sponsors for the show and like monetizing it. It was more of like a vehicle for me to apply a whole bunch of skills that I wanted to add to my mix. So I think that's an excellent question. I think like trying to give a container or a project by which you can learn those things, and then being realistic again, like maybe you can do that 2 to 3 hours a week. Like what would be a fun way? Make the learning process fun, not just a drudge for you to do that, and then practically learn that with some sort of project you are assigning to yourself that feels right-sized and attainable.
Thank you. That's helpful.
I agree. I hope it's better than those LinkedIn webinars because I can't pay attention to them myself. Tune out after 5 minutes.
Yeah, thank you, Miranda. Awesome. Well, thanks everybody. Hope you read the book. Hope you share it. Brie, thanks for chatting with us and sharing so transparently about the book, about your journey, about the process. It's not always the case that folks are willing to um, take lift the hood and let us take a peek at the engine. So thanks so much for sharing.
Thanks for having me. And if any of you have questions or want to stay connected, I'm on LinkedIn and Substack. please connect with me. I always like meeting new people in this space and supporting them. And I hope you read the book, and hope that it gives you language and also some practical ways to start working this way if it sounds like it's up your alley.
And I'll send an email to everyone who joined us with links to links to things, all the important things. All right, bye everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.